The maintenance office sat in the basement of Sinclair's flagship hotel, a concrete tomb lit by fluorescent tubes that hummed like dying insects. Marcus Hayes stood at the workbench, studying blueprints spread across scarred wood, his fingers tracing lines that represented the building's central heating system. Outside, December's second week had brought temperatures plunging to -15, the kind of cold that turned breath to ice crystals before they hit the ground. His phone buzzed. "Emma's school," the caller ID announced. "Mr. Hayes, Emma's having trouble breathing. We've administered her inhaler, but—" He was moving before the sentence finished, grabbing his coat, the blueprints forgotten. The elevator climbed too slowly, his reflection in the polished doors showing a man whose jaw worked with suppressed fear. That old tell Emma had learned to read. The lobby blurred past, Grace Miller glancing up from her drafting table near the concierge desk, her expression shifting from concentration to concern as he ran. The school nurse met him at the entrance, Emma's small body folded in a plastic chair, her chest working too hard for air that wouldn't come. Her eyes found his, wide with the particular terror of drowning on dry land. "Baby girl." He scooped her up, feeling how her ribs strained against his palm. "We're okay. You're okay." But she wasn't. The emergency room doctor's face told him that before words did, the kind of professional gravity that preceded expensive problems. "Mr. Hayes, your daughter's asthma has progressed to a concerning stage. The current medication isn't adequate anymore. We need to discuss escalated treatment options." The options came with numbers. $28,000 for the surgery that would remove the damaged tissue in her lungs, $1,500 monthly for the new inhaler that might prevent future crises. Insurance covered 60%, leaving a canyon of debt he couldn't cross. "How long can we wait?" The doctor's pause contained the answer. "Another attack like this one? She might not make it to the hospital in time." Marcus sat in the waiting room while they kept Emma overnight for observation, his head in his hands, doing math that never balanced. His salary at Sinclair Hotels was the best money he'd ever made, but 3 years of medical debt from Rebecca's cancer still crushed him. The checking account held $4,000. The surgery cost 7 times that. Victoria Sinclair found him there at midnight, still wearing her business suit from whatever function had kept her downtown. She didn't ask permission before sitting, didn't offer condolences he couldn't use. "I spoke with Dr. Morrison." He explained the situation. Marcus's hands tightened into fists. "This isn't your concern. Emma is lying in a hospital bed because her lungs are failing. That makes it my concern. Because you gave me this job? Because you think that means you own my daughter's life now?" Victoria's face remained calm, the practiced composure of someone who'd learned early that emotion was weakness. "Because 3 weeks ago, you gave a stranger your only coat in a snowstorm. Because you missed the interview that would have saved you from eviction to make sure a baby didn't freeze to death. Because when the heating system failed last week, you worked 16 straight hours to keep 400 guests from hypothermia while engineers with degrees stood around calculating overtime pay. That's my job. That's who you are." She pulled an envelope from her purse, placed it on the chair between them. "The hospital billing department will receive payment in full tomorrow morning. Emma gets the surgery, the medication, whatever she needs." The envelope sat there, thick with implications he couldn't accept. Marcus stood, his voice low and hard. "I don't want your charity." "This isn't charity, it's what? A bonus for good behavior? Payment for being your project?" Victoria rose too, her height bringing them nearly eye to eye. "You saved my life." The words hung between them, too large for the antiseptic waiting room. "The heating system," she continued. "You found the sabotage. The valve Derek Blackwood's maintenance crew had loosened just enough to fail under pressure. If that boiler had exploded during the charity gala with 500 people upstairs..." Her voice caught, the first crack in her armor he'd witnessed. "You stopped it. You saved everyone in that building, including me. I was doing my job. No. You were being exceptional at a job you're overqualified for because you needed the money to save your daughter. She pushed the envelope closer. Let me do the same. Marcus looked at the envelope, then at her face, searching for the angle, the price that always came with money from people like her. Rebecca's voice echoed in his memory, a conversation from the final weeks. If you ever need help, baby, take it. Don't let pride hurt our girl. But this wasn't about pride. This was about the difference between a man who earned his way and one who accepted handouts from billionaires who collected people like charity cases. I can't. He walked away, leaving the envelope on the chair, leaving Victoria standing alone in the fluorescent glare. Emma came home the next day with a prescription they couldn't afford and instructions for a surgery they couldn't schedule. Mrs. Porter brought casserole, her face lined with worry. She tried to hide behind platitudes about God's plan. Grace knocked on their door that evening, Noah balanced on her hip, a bag of groceries in her free hand. The hotel staff took up a collection. She set the bag on the kitchen counter, not meeting his eyes. We wanted to help. Marcus found $2,000 in crumpled bills beneath the bread and milk, more money than his co-workers could spare, offered because they'd seen him work himself sick to keep that building running. He sat at the kitchen table after Grace left, counting bills that represented someone's rent money, someone's car payment, someone's own emergency fund depleted for his crisis. The phone rang at 7, Victoria's name on the screen. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message twice. I paid the hospital bill. You can be angry about it tomorrow. Tonight, know that Emma has a surgery scheduled for Monday morning and medication waiting at the pharmacy. You didn't ask for help, Marcus. I'm giving it anyway. That's what people who care about each other do. The pharmacy bag arrived by courier an hour later. Inside, the inhaler that cost $1,500 and a note in Victoria's handwriting. This isn't debt. This isn't charity. This is me refusing to watch a little girl suffer because her father is too stubborn to accept that he deserves help. Emma found him crying in the bathroom, something she hadn't seen since Rebecca's funeral. Her small hand slipped into his. It's okay to be sad, Daddy. Mom used to say being sad means you're brave enough to feel things. He pulled her close, the 7-year-old wisdom that sounded too much like Rebecca's voice. I'm not sad, baby girl. I'm just tired. Mrs. Victoria is nice. She gave me crayons at the hospital and didn't talk to me like I'm little. She talked to me like Mom did, like I'm a real person. That observation settled into his chest with uncomfortable weight. Emma had Rebecca's gift for reading people, for seeing past the surface to what mattered underneath. Monday morning arrived with fresh snow and the kind of clarity that came from exhausted acceptance. Marcus carried Emma into the surgical center, her hand gripping his with the fierce trust of a child who believed her father could fix anything. Victoria waited in the family lounge, not asking permission to be there, just present the way Rebecca used to be for other people's crises. The surgery took 4 hours. Marcus paced the waiting room, counting ceiling tiles, memorizing the pattern in the carpet, anything to avoid thinking about his daughter under anesthesia, about lungs being cut and stitched, about the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. Victoria sat in the corner, her laptop open but her eyes on him, tracking his movement like she was solving an equation she couldn't quite balance. Why are you here? The question came out harder than he meant. Because Emma asked me to be. That stopped him mid-pace. When? This morning, when I brought those art supplies to your apartment. She said her mom used to tell her that good people show up when it's hard, not just when it's easy. She wanted to make sure I was a good person. Marcus sat down, the fight draining out of him. What did you tell her? That I was trying to be. That your father was teaching me how. The surgeon emerged before he could respond, still in scrubs, the mask pulled down to reveal the cautious optimism of someone who'd just done something difficult successfully. The procedure went perfectly. Emma's recovery should be straightforward. She's asking for you. His daughter looked small in the hospital bed, an oxygen tube in her nose, but her eyes were clear when they found his face. She held out her hand and he took it, careful of the IV line. Did you thank Mrs. Victoria? Her voice was rough from the breathing tube. I will, baby girl. Mom would like her. They're both the kind of people who fix things. That evening, Marcus found Victoria in the hospital cafeteria, staring at coffee she wasn't drinking. He sat down across from her, the fluorescent lights washing color from both their faces. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, too small for what she'd done. You're welcome. I can't pay you back. Not for a long time. Maybe never. Victoria's expression shifted, something raw breaking through the controlled facade. I don't want to be paid back, Marcus. I want... She stopped, recalibrated. 3 years ago, my parents died in a car accident. Drunk driver, wrong place, wrong time. I inherited $3.2 billion and a company I didn't know how to run. For the first year, I threw money at problems because that's what I knew how to do. I funded charities, wrote checks, attended galas. I thought that's what good people did with money. She pushed the coffee away, her hands flat on the table. Then I watched you give away your coat in a blizzard. Not because someone was watching, not for recognition or tax write-offs. You did it because a baby was cold, and you had something warm. That kind of goodness doesn't come from money. It comes from who you are when no one's keeping score. That doesn't mean I'm comfortable being your charity case. You're not my charity case. You're... She met his eyes, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked uncertain. You're teaching me what it means to be good without conditions. To help because it matters, not because it looks good in a press release. Marcus studied her face, searching for the performance, the angle. But Victoria Sinclair's composure had cracked enough to show something genuine underneath, a loneliness that looked uncomfortably familiar. Derek Blackwood came to see me last week. Victoria's expression hardened. What did he want? To tell me you're replacing your dead parents with a found family. That I'm just a project to make you feel less guilty about inheriting blood money. Derek wants to destroy me because my father chose me over him as successor. He'll say anything to make you doubt. Are you? Marcus leaned forward. Using me to feel better about yourself? The question sat between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to examine fully. Victoria's hands trembled before she clasped them together, the only outward sign of whatever fought beneath her surface. I don't know. The honesty of it surprised him. Maybe at first I saw Emma and thought about what it would have been like if I'd had a father who cared more about me than his company. Maybe I saw you working 3 jobs to keep your daughter healthy and remembered my parents barely noticing I existed. Maybe I am trying to fix something broken in myself by helping you. She stood, gathering her coat. But that doesn't make Emma's lungs any less real. It doesn't make your work any less valuable. And it doesn't change the fact that you're one of the few genuinely good people I've ever met. So yes, maybe I am being selfish by wanting to be around that, by hoping some of it rubs off. Marcus watched her walk away, her silhouette disappearing through the cafeteria doors, and felt the foundations of his assumptions beginning to shift. Victoria Sinclair wasn't what he'd thought. She was messier, more human, carrying her own damage in ways that looked nothing like his, but felt eerily similar. Emma recovered quickly, her lungs healing in ways that made the doctors cautiously optimistic about long-term prognosis. Grace stopped by the apartment most evenings, Noah toddling after Emma, while the 7-year-old taught him colors and shapes with the patience of someone twice her age. The collection of single parents and displaced people created an accidental family in Marcus's small living room, held together by shared struggle and the kind of grace that came from surviving hard things. Victoria stayed away for a week, then 2, giving him space he hadn't asked for but apparently needed. Mrs. Porter mentioned seeing her at the community center, teaching art classes to kids from the housing projects, getting paint on her expensive clothes, and looking more relaxed than Marcus had ever witnessed. "That woman's trying real hard," Mrs. Porter observed, setting down fresh cornbread that filled his kitchen with the smell of his childhood. "Question is, what's she trying so hard for?" Marcus didn't have an answer, but the question followed him through his days, through fixing pipes and rewiring electrical panels, through the routine maintenance that kept Sinclair hotels running while the people upstairs collected bonuses for his invisible labor. The central heating system failed on a Tuesday night, the temperature gauge in the basement dropping from 70 to 50 in less than an hour. Marcus found the problem immediately. The main valve had been loosened just enough to cause a slow pressure drop, invisible until it became catastrophic. Someone with access and knowledge had sabotaged it, and there was only one person with motive. Derek Blackwood's maintenance crew had been in that basement the day before, performing an inspection that shouldn't have been necessary. Marcus photographed the valve, documented the pressure readings, then went to work fixing what had been deliberately broken. The repair took 16 hours, his hands cramping from cold and repetitive motion, his back screaming from positions the human spine wasn't designed to hold. He finished at dawn, the system purring back to life just as the first breakfast shift arrived. Victoria found him in the basement, covered in grease and probably hypothermia, sitting on the concrete floor because standing required more energy than he had left. She didn't speak, just helped him stand, her arm around his waist taking more weight than he wanted to admit. The elevator ride to her office happened in silence, her fingers cold against his when she steadied him as they stepped out on the executive floor. "You saved everyone in this building." Her voice was quiet, precise. "If that boiler had exploded during the holiday gala tonight with 500 guests, it didn't. Because you worked through the night to make sure it couldn't. Because you saw the sabotage and fixed it anyway, even though calling the police and shutting down the system would have been easier." Marcus leaned against her desk, exhaustion making his words less guarded than usual. "Derek's trying to bankrupt you. Make the hotel look negligent, drive down stock prices, buy you out when you can't recover. It's not personal. It's just business." "It's very personal." Victoria moved to the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass. "Derek was my father's protege. When Dad died and left the company to me instead of him, Derek took it as a betrayal. He spent 3 years trying to prove I don't deserve this, that I'm a spoiled little girl playing businesswoman with Daddy's money." "Are you?" She turned, and her smile held no humor. 3 years ago, I would have said yes. I inherited this company and had no idea what I was doing. I almost let Derek win because I believed him when he said I wasn't capable." "What changed?" "I watched you risk frostbite to save a stranger's baby. I saw you turn down a job offer because accepting help felt like weakness. I realized that capability isn't about degrees or pedigrees. It's about showing up when things are hard and doing the work anyway." Marcus studied her face, seeing past the expensive clothes and practiced confidence to the uncertainty underneath. "You're not your father's daughter because of what you inherited. You're your own person because of what you choose to do with it." Something shifted in her expression, vulnerable and raw. "I want to be someone Emma thinks is good. Someone you don't look at with suspicion every time I try to help." The admission hung between them, too honest for the professional distance they'd maintained. Marcus took a step closer, close enough to see that her eyes weren't quite blue, more gray with flecks of something lighter. "Then stop trying to save me and let me stand next to you instead." Victoria's breath caught, the sound audible in the quiet office. "I don't know how to do that." Everyone I've ever known either wanted something from me or wanted me to be someone else. You're the first person who seems content to let me just be. Because I don't need you to be anything but honest. Her hand rose, hesitated, then touched his face, fingers tracing the stubble on his jaw. I'm terrified of you, Marcus Hayes. Terrified that I'm going to mess this up, whatever this is. Terrified that you're going to realize I'm not worth. He kissed her, cutting off words that were heading toward a darkness he recognized. She froze for a heartbeat, then melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss tasted like coffee and something desperate, like two people who'd been holding their breath too long, finally remembering how to exhale. When they broke apart, her forehead rested against his, both of them breathing hard. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. Probably. Derek will use it against me. The press will have a field day. Your daughter might hate me for not being her mother. Emma already likes you better than me most days. Victoria laughed, the sound shaky. I don't know how to be what you need. Then we'll figure it out together. He stepped back, putting necessary space between them. But first, I need to sleep for approximately 48 hours. And you need to fire Derek Blackwood before he kills someone. I can't. He's on the board. Firing him requires proof of malfeasance, and he's too smart to leave evidence. Marcus pulled the phone from his pocket, showed her the photographs of the loosened valve, the documentation of pressure readings that proved deliberate tampering. Is this enough? Victoria's expression transformed, the executive sliding back into place over the vulnerable woman who'd just kissed him. This is enough to start a formal investigation. Combined with the other incidents over the past 6 months, there have been others? 3 near misses in different properties. I thought they were accidents, bad luck. But if Derek's been systematically sabotaging, then he's not trying to buy you out. He's trying to destroy you completely. The implications settled over them, darkening the morning light filtering through the windows. Victoria moved to her desk, already reaching for the phone. The transformation from uncertain woman to ruthless CEO complete. I need to call my lawyer. The board meets tomorrow, and I want Derek removed before he has a chance to do more damage. Marcus headed for the door, then paused. Victoria? She looked up, one hand on the phone. Emma was right. You do fix things. You just fix them differently than most people. Her smile was small but genuine. I'm learning from the best. The board meeting happened without him, but Marcus heard the aftermath from Grace, who'd heard it from the executive assistants, who'd heard it through the conference room door. Victoria had presented the evidence, cool and precise, giving Derek just enough rope to hang himself. He'd denied everything, then made the mistake of questioning her competence, her right to lead the company her father had built. Victoria had responded with numbers, with quarterly reports showing growth under her leadership, with testimonials from employees about workplace improvements. She'd systematically dismantled every argument Derek made, then finished with security footage of his maintenance crew in the basement the day before the heating failure. Derek Blackwood was escorted from the building by security, his access revoked, his position on the board terminated. The investigation would take months, but the immediate threat was neutralized. Marcus found Victoria in her office that evening, staring at the city lights that transformed Manhattan into a galaxy of possibilities. She didn't turn when he entered, just spoke to the window. My father used to say that power was about knowing when to show mercy and when to destroy your enemies completely. I never understood what he meant until today. Regrets? None. She turned, and her face showed the exhaustion of someone who just won a war. Derek would have kept coming, kept sabotaging, kept trying to prove I wasn't worthy. Sometimes you have to cut out the infection before it spreads. Marcus crossed to her, his hands finding her shoulders, feeling the tension coiled beneath expensive fabric. How are you doing? I'm scared. The admission came easier this time. Scared that I'm becoming the kind of person who destroys careers without blinking. Scared that power is changing me into something I won't recognize. You fired someone who tried to kill people for profit. That's not power changing you. That's knowing the difference between mercy and justice. Victoria leaned back against him, her head fitting beneath his chin in a way that felt dangerously comfortable. Stay with me tonight. Not like that, just stay. I don't want to be alone. So he did, calling Mrs. Porter to watch Emma, then settling onto Victoria's obscenely comfortable couch while she changed into sweatpants that probably cost more than his monthly salary. They ordered Chinese food and watched terrible movies, not talking about the future or the past, just existing in a present that felt fragile and impossibly valuable. Victoria fell asleep against his shoulder halfway through the second movie, her breathing evening out into the rhythm of exhausted peace. Marcus stayed still, afraid to wake her, afraid to examine too closely what this meant, what they were becoming to each other. His phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Emma wants to know if you're with Mrs. Victoria. I told her probably. She says tell Mrs. Victoria she's doing the jaw thing, and that means she's scared but trying to be brave. Marcus looked down at Victoria's sleeping face, saw the vulnerability that only appeared when she wasn't performing for the world. Emma was right. Victoria was scared. Had been scared this whole time, just better at hiding it than most people. He texted back, "Tell Emma that Mrs. Victoria is very brave. Tell her that being scared doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Grace's response came immediately. "Emma says she knows. She says Mom used to tell you the same thing." The observation landed with unexpected force. Rebecca's wisdom filtered through their daughter's perception. He'd spent 3 years being scared, of losing Emma, of failing as a father, of never being enough to fill the hole Rebecca's death had left. Victoria's fear looked different, but felt the same. The terror of someone carrying weight they weren't sure they could hold. Dawn found them still on the couch, Victoria's head on his chest, his arm numb from staying in one position too long. She woke slowly, blinking against the light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. "You stayed." "You asked me to." She sat up, sleep-tousled and more beautiful than anyone had a right to be at 6 in the morning. "I'm going to mess this up, Marcus. I don't know how to be in a relationship that isn't transactional. My parents bought my affection with things I didn't want. Derek pretended to care while plotting my downfall. Everyone I've ever trusted wanted something I couldn't give." Then we start from scratch. No expectations, no transactions, just two people trying to figure out if they can build something real. Victoria's eyes searched his face, looking for the catch, the angle. "What if I can't? What if I'm too damaged to be what Emma needs, what you need? What if you're exactly what we need, damage and all?" He stood, offering his hand. "Come have breakfast with us. Mrs. Porter makes pancakes that could convert atheists. Emma will talk your ear off about the art project you helped her with. It'll be chaotic and loud and nothing like what you're used to." That sounds terrifying. It is, but it's also real. She took his hand, let him pull her up, and something in her expression shifted from fear to tentative hope. "Okay. But I should warn you, I'm terrible with kids. I have no idea what 7-year-olds like." "Emma will tell you, loudly and repeatedly. It's one of her gifts." They took a cab to his apartment, Victoria looking increasingly nervous as they left Manhattan's gleaming towers for the worn brownstones of his neighborhood. Mrs. Porter answered the door, took one look at Victoria's designer sweatpants and expensive anxiety, and pulled her into a hug that probably violated several social boundaries. "About time you two figured it out." Mrs. Porter released Victoria, who looked shell-shocked. "Emma, Your daddy's here with company. His daughter appeared from the kitchen, paint-stained and glowing with the kind of energy only children possessed before coffee. She launched herself at Marcus, then at Victoria with equal enthusiasm.
Mrs. Victoria, did you see the sunrise? It was pink and orange, and I tried to paint it, but the colors weren't right, and Mrs. Porter says that's okay because art is about trying and—
Breathe, baby girl. Marcus laughed, catching her mid-sentence. Let Mrs. Victoria get through the door first. Emma grabbed Victoria's hand, towing her toward the kitchen, where an elaborate art project covered most surfaces.
I'm making a painting for you because you helped Daddy save me, and Mrs. Porter says saying thank you with art is better than words, because words go away, but art stays forever.
Victoria knelt to examine the painting, her face doing something complicated that might have been tears fighting past composure.
It's beautiful, Emma.
Is this your family? That's Daddy, and that's me, and that's Mom in heaven watching, and that's you. Emma pointed to a figure standing slightly apart, hand extended toward the family cluster. You're not in the group yet, because you just got here, but you're holding hands, so you're part of it, even if you don't know it yet. The observation was so typically Emma, wise beyond her years and devastating in its honesty, that Marcus saw the exact moment it broke through Victoria's defenses. She sat back on her heels, looking at this 7-year-old who just redefined belonging with paint and brutal clarity. Thank you for including me. Mrs. Porter says you're lonely like Daddy used to be before he stopped being sad about Mom all the time. She says maybe you can be lonely together until you're not lonely anymore. Victoria's laugh was wet. Mrs. Porter is very wise. She's old. Old people know things. Mrs. Porter snorted from the kitchen. I heard that, child, and you're not wrong. Breakfast became an event. Emma orchestrating seating arrangements and conversation topics with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. She asked Victoria about running a company with the same curiosity she applied to why the sky was blue, accepting complicated answers with thoughtful nods. So you're like the captain of a really big ship, and Daddy fixes the ship when it breaks, and that makes you a team, even though you do different jobs. Victoria glanced at Marcus, something shifting in her expression. That's exactly right. We're a team. Teams work better when they trust each other. That's what my soccer coach says. Your soccer coach is also wise, Emma beamed. All the adults in my life are wise. Except Daddy sometimes when he thinks I can't have dessert for breakfast. The morning dissolved into the kind of domestic chaos Marcus had forgotten existed. Dishes clattering, Emma's laugh echoing off walls, Mrs. Porter's running commentary on everything. Victoria sat in the middle of it, looking overwhelmed and terrified, and happier than he'd seen her. When they finally escaped to the relative quiet of the front steps, the December cold biting through inadequate coats, Victoria leaned against the railing and exhaled slowly. Your daughter is extraordinary. She is. Takes after her mother. I'm going to disappoint her, you know. I'll mess up, say the wrong thing, not understand what she needs. Marcus turned her to face him, hands on her shoulders. Rebecca used to say that perfect parents don't exist, only present ones. Emma doesn't need you to be perfect. She needs you to show up and try. I don't know how to do family, Marcus. My parents taught me how to run a company, how to make money, how to win. They didn't teach me how to love people without conditions. Then we'll learn together. He pulled her close, felt her arms wrap around him with desperate strength. No conditions, Victoria. Just us, figuring it out as we go. She lifted her face, and he kissed her properly this time, slow and deliberate, a promise rather than an exploration. When they broke apart, her eyes held something he hadn't seen before, not just hope, but belief. I'm falling in love with you. The words came out quiet, frightened. I don't know what to do with that. Start by believing I'm falling too. He touched her face, memorizing the moment. Start by trusting that this is real, that I'm not going anywhere, that you're allowed to be happy. Victoria's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She glanced at the screen, and her expression hardened. It's my lawyer. The preliminary investigation found evidence Derek's been embezzling for 2 years. Over $4 million in fraudulent contracts and kickbacks. That's good news, right? Proof he was corrupt. It means I have to testify. It means dragging the company through a very public trial. It means everyone will see exactly how blind I was to what was happening under my leadership. Marcus felt her pulling away, not physically, but emotionally, the walls rebuilding as she shifted back into survival mode. Or it means everyone will see how you caught it, stopped it, and held him accountable. Your choice which story you tell. She looked at him, really looked, and something in her face softened. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. You did the right thing. Now you stand behind it. The phone buzzed again, more urgent this time. Victoria sighed, stepping back. I have to go. Conference call with the legal team, then damage control with the board. Go. We'll be here when you're done. She paused at the bottom of the steps, turned back. Marcus, this thing we're doing, this trying to build something real, I need you to know I'm going to mess up. I'm going to default to solving problems with money, to keeping walls up, to running when things get hard. It's what I know. And I'm going to default to stubborn pride, to not asking for help when I need it, to assuming the worst when you're just trying to care. It's what I know. He descended the steps, met her at the bottom. But we'll call each other on it. We'll be honest even when it's uncomfortable. And we'll trust that what we're building is worth the work. Victoria kissed him once more, quick and fierce. Emma was right. You're teaching me what being brave really means. Then she was gone, disappearing into a waiting car that probably cost more than his annual salary, leaving him standing on a Brooklyn stoop with the winter wind cutting through his coat and the future suddenly looking less terrifying than it had for 3 solid years. Mrs. Porter appeared beside him, her coat wrapped tight against the cold. That woman's going to break your heart or save it. Haven't decided which yet. Maybe both. Rebecca would have liked her. Different as night and day, but the same where it counts. Mrs. Porter patted his arm. Your girl saw it first. Children always do. They see past what people show to who they really are underneath. Marcus watched the car disappear around the corner, Victoria's face a pale blur in the back window. I don't know how to do this, Mrs. P. Don't know how to let someone in when the last person I loved died in my arms. You do it the way you do everything else, child. One day at a time, one choice at a time, trusting that love doesn't diminish because you share it with someone new. She squeezed his arm. Rebecca's not less loved because you're falling for Victoria. Love multiplies, Marcus. It doesn't divide. The words settled into his chest, right next to the fear and hope that had become his constant companions. Inside the apartment, Emma's voice rose in song, off-key and enthusiastic, filling the space with a kind of joy that made grief bearable. He climbed the steps, went inside to his daughter, to the life he'd built from wreckage and determination. Victoria Sinclair was entering that life now, bringing her own damage and hope, her own fear and fierce determination to be better than her past. They would figure it out together, or they would fail trying. But for the first time since Rebecca's death, Marcus Hayes believed that building something new didn't mean forgetting what came before. It meant honoring the foundation while adding new rooms, expanding the structure to hold more love, more people, more possibility. The next 3 weeks became a controlled detonation of Marcus's carefully maintained equilibrium. Victoria threw herself into the Derek investigation with the same intensity she'd once reserved for quarterly earnings reports. Marcus watched from the periphery as she transformed from uncertain billionaire heiress into something harder, more focused. A woman who'd discovered that righteous anger could be as effective as inherited wealth. Grace Miller proved an unexpected ally in the chaos. She'd been working at Sinclair Hotels for 6 weeks now, her graphic design skills turning functional promotional materials into something approaching art. Noah spent his days in the hotel's employee childcare facility, a benefit Victoria had instituted over the board's objections, arguing that parents who didn't worry about their children worked better than those who did. Your girl's got steel in her spine. Grace sat across from Marcus in the basement office, Noah sleeping in a carrier strapped to her chest. The way she went after Derek in that meeting, I heard the assistants talking. She didn't just fire him. She destroyed every argument he made, every excuse, every attempt to shift blame. It was surgical. Marcus adjusted a valve on the workbench, his hands moving with the practiced efficiency of 2 decades doing this work. She's been scared her whole life that she didn't earn her position. Derek confirmed every fear she ever had about herself. Now she's proving him wrong. You love her. Grace said it matter-of-factly, no question in the statement. His hand stilled on the valve. That obvious? You look at her the way my ex-boyfriend never looked at me. Like she's terrifying and precious, and you can't quite believe she's real. Grace shifted Noah higher on her chest. Does Emma know? Emma knew before I did. Told me 2 weeks ago that Mrs. Victoria made me do the less sad face instead of the trying not to be sad face. Grace laughed, the sound bouncing off concrete walls. 7-year-olds are brutal truth-tellers. The conversation was interrupted by Victoria herself, appearing in the doorway still wearing her courtroom armor from that morning's deposition. Her heels clicked against concrete as she descended into Marcus's domain, looking as out of place as a diamond in a toolbox. Grace, Noah's daycare teacher asked me to give you this. She handed over a folder. Apparently, he's advanced enough for the toddler program. They want to move him up next month. Grace's face transformed, pride and disbelief warring for dominance. He's only 18 months. He's exceptionally bright. Wonder where he gets that. Victoria's smile was genuine, the practiced CEO mask slipping to show something warmer underneath. Grace excused herself, leaving Marcus alone with Victoria in the fluorescent-lit basement. She moved to his workbench, her fingers trailing across tools she couldn't name, creating a careful distance that felt deliberate. The prosecutor wants you to testify. Her voice was controlled, professional. About finding the sabotaged valve, the repair, the security footage you helped retrieve. Marcus set down his wrench. When? 2 weeks. They're building the case for attempted manslaughter alongside the fraud charges. Your testimony establishes intent, that Derek knew the heating failure could kill people and did it anyway. I'll do it. Victoria's shoulders dropped, tension releasing that he hadn't realized she was carrying. Thank you. I know testifying means publicity, reporters, having your life examined. I wouldn't ask if... Victoria? He crossed to her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You don't have to justify this. Derek tried to kill people. He needs to face consequences. If my testimony helps make that happen, I'm there. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. I'm drowning in this. The investigation, the media, the board asking why I didn't see the corruption sooner. Every day someone implies I'm incompetent or complicit or both, and I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't keep pretending I'm strong enough to handle this alone. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, feeling how she trembled despite her best efforts at composure. Then stop pretending. Stop trying to be the woman your father thought you should be, and just be the woman you are, scared and brave, and doing the hard thing anyway. What if the woman I am isn't enough? She saved my daughter's life. She exposed corruption that would have continued for years. She's teaching Emma what it means to stand up for what's right, even when it costs you." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "That woman is more than enough, Victoria. She's extraordinary." The kiss that followed was different from before. Less desperate exploration, more deliberate claiming. Victoria's hands fisted in his work shirt, grease stains and all, pulling him closer with an urgency that spoke to weeks of restraint finally breaking. When they separated, both breathing hard, Victoria's lipstick was smudged, and her hair had escaped its professional twist. She looked younger, less controlled, more real. "I want you to meet someone." The words came out rushed, nervous. "My therapist thinks it would be good for me to introduce the important people in my life to each other. She says I compartmentalize relationships to avoid vulnerability." Marcus couldn't help the laugh that escaped. "You're in therapy?" "3 times a week since my parents died. Dr. Chen specializes in grief and inherited trauma. She's been helping me understand why I sabotage relationships before they get serious." Victoria straightened her jacket, attempting to restore order to her appearance. "I told her about you, about Emma, about being terrified I'll destroy this because I don't know how to do healthy attachment." "What did she say?" "That fear of destroying something proves I value it. That acknowledging my damage is the first step to not letting it control me. That I should stop waiting for you to leave and start trusting that you're choosing to stay." Marcus studied her face, seeing the courage it took to admit vulnerability, to seek help, to trust him with the messy reality beneath her polished exterior. "When do you want me to meet her?" "Never. Also immediately. Also, I'm terrified." Victoria's smile was shaky. "She suggested a joint session. You, me, her office, talking about what we're building, what scares us, what we need from each other." The idea of sitting in a therapist's office discussing his feelings made Marcus's skin crawl. But Victoria's expression held such fragile hope that refusal felt impossible. "Okay. When?" "Friday, 4 o'clock. Her office is in Tribeca." Victoria kissed him quickly, gratitude and relief in the gesture. "Thank you. For staying. For not running when I show you all the broken pieces." "Victoria, we're all broken pieces, trying to fit together into something whole. That's not weakness. That's just being human." She left him in the basement, her heels clicking away toward elevator music and boardrooms, leaving Marcus alone with valves and wrenches and the uncomfortable realization that he was falling in love with a woman whose damage matched his own, in ways that felt both terrifying and inevitable. Friday arrived with the kind of anxiety Marcus usually reserved for Emma's medical emergencies. "Doctor." Chen's office occupied the 3rd floor of a Tribeca brownstone, all exposed brick and comfortable furniture that probably cost more than his truck. The therapist herself was in her 50s, Korean-American, with kind eyes and the particular stillness of someone who'd heard every variation of human suffering. "Marcus, I've heard a great deal about you." She gestured to a couch where Victoria already sat, hands clasped tight in her lap. "Thank you for coming." He settled beside Victoria, their thighs touching, drawing comfort from the contact. Dr. Chen arranged herself in a chair across from them, notepad balanced on her knee. "Victoria asked for this session because she's afraid. She spent 3 years in therapy, learning to recognize her patterns, the way she pushes people away when they get close, the belief that love is transactional, the fear that anyone who knows the real her will leave. Now she's met someone she wants to keep, and that's activating every defense mechanism she's built." Victoria's face had gone carefully blank, the mask she wore in boardrooms sliding into place. "Marcus, what brings you here today?" The directness caught him off guard. "Victoria asked me to come." "And if she hadn't asked, would you want to be here?"
Honesty felt like exposure, but Victoria's hand had found his, squeezing tight.
No, I don't trust therapy. I don't trust talking about feelings to strangers. I spent 3 years after my wife died in survival mode, and talking about it wouldn't have changed anything. Dr. Chen nodded, unsurprised. Victoria mentioned you lost your wife to cancer, that you raised your daughter alone, that you've built a life defined by self-reliance and not asking for help. That's accurate. How's that working for you? The question was gentle, but it landed like a punch. Marcus felt Victoria's eyes on him, felt the weight of honest answer versus protective deflection. It kept us alive, kept Emma fed and housed and medicated. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. And now? Now that you're not just surviving, but potentially building something new, how's that self-reliance working? Marcus's jaw worked, the tell Emma had learned to read. It's harder. Victoria wants to help, wants to be part of our lives, and I keep waiting for the price. Keep expecting her to realize we're too much work, too much damage, not worth the hassle. Do you believe that? That you're not worth the effort? The question hung in the air between them. Victoria's hand tightened on his, her breathing careful and controlled. I believe I'm a mechanic who makes $42,000 a year. I believe Victoria's a billionaire who could have anyone. I believe the world we come from don't usually mix, and when they do, it's the working class guy who gets hurt. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral. Victoria, how do you respond to that? Victoria's voice was steady, but her hand trembled in his. I respond that Marcus sees money where I see loneliness. He sees a billionaire. I see someone who inherited wealth I didn't earn from parents who barely knew I existed. He thinks I could have anyone. I think I've never had anyone who wanted me for something other than my net worth or my last name or what I could do for their career. She turned to face him, forcing eye contact. You're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen Victoria, not Sinclair Hotels. The first person who got angry when I tried to help instead of asking what else I could give. The first person who made me earn your trust instead of assuming my money bought it. Marcus felt something crack in his chest, protective armor giving way to uncomfortable truth. I'm scared. Scared of needing you and losing you. Scared Emma will love you and you'll leave. Scared I'll mess this up because I don't know how to do relationships that aren't about survival. That's the first honest thing either of you have said. Dr. Chen's smile was approving. You're both terrified. You're both damaged. You're both convinced the other person is going to wise up and leave. That's not pathology. That's intimacy. The question is whether you're brave enough to be scared together instead of alone. The session continued for another 40 minutes, peeling back layers of defense and deflection until Marcus felt raw and exposed. Dr. Chen asked hard questions about Rebecca's death, about the guilt he carried for being relieved when the suffering finally ended. She asked Victoria about her parents' car accident, about the complicated grief of losing people she'd never really known. When they emerged into late afternoon sunlight, both of them looked shell-shocked. That was brutal. Victoria's voice was hoarse. Absolutely terrible. Marcus agreed. When do we go back? Her laugh was surprised and genuine. She suggested weekly sessions for both of us, together and separate. I have a better idea. Marcus pulled her into a doorway, away from sidewalk traffic. I hate therapy. You clearly need it. How about you keep going, and I promise to actually talk to you when I'm scared, instead of shutting down. Victoria's expression shifted through several emotions before landing on something like relief. You don't have to do therapy for me. I know, but I do have to communicate. Dr. Chen was right about that. I can't keep expecting you to read my mind and then getting angry when you don't.
He touched her face, thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone.
I'm going to mess this up, Victoria. I'm going to shut down when I'm scared. I'm going to compare you to Rebecca without meaning to. I'm going to make assumptions about what you want instead of asking. And I'm going to throw money at problems instead of being present. I'm going to retreat into work when emotions get uncomfortable. I'm going to hurt Emma because I don't understand what 7-year-olds need. She mirrored his gesture, her hand cupping his jaw. But we'll call each other on it. We'll be honest even when it's hard, and we'll trust that what we're building can survive our damage. They stood there on a Tribeca sidewalk, holding each other while the city moved around them with characteristic indifference. Marcus felt something settle in his chest, the constant anxiety that had lived there since Rebecca's death loosening just enough to let in possibility. His phone buzzed. Emma's school, the 3rd time this week. Mr. Hayes, Emma's fine, but we need you to come in. She's been defending another child from bullies, and it's escalated to a physical altercation. 20 minutes later, Marcus sat in the principal's office across from his daughter, who had paint in her hair and a split lip, but looked unrepentant. Victoria had insisted on coming, her presence both comforting and complicating. Emma hit another student. Principal Rodriguez was in her 40s, tired, trying to be fair. This is the 3rd incident this month. The 3rd time defending someone. Emma's voice was steady, her jaw set in the same stubborn line Marcus saw in the mirror. Tyler was making fun of Jamie because Jamie has 2 dads. Tyler said that was weird and wrong and Jamie was going to hell. So I told Tyler he was ignorant and should read a book. Then Tyler pushed Jamie, so I pushed Tyler back. Marcus felt pride and frustration warring for dominance. Emma, you can't hit people. Why not? Adults say violence isn't the answer, but sometimes it's the only thing bullies understand. Tyler's been mean to Jamie for months. The teachers tell him to stop, but he doesn't. Someone had to show him that hurting people has consequences. Victoria made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Marcus shot her a look before returning attention to his daughter. Baby girl, I understand wanting to protect your friend. But hitting someone can get you expelled. It can hurt them. It can hurt you. Emma's expression crumpled, 7-year-old bravado giving way to tears.
Jamie was crying, Daddy. He was crying because Tyler said his family was wrong. And I know what it feels like when people say your family is wrong because mine is different too. We don't have a mom anymore, and some kids say that's sad or weird. So when Tyler was mean to Jamie, I got really mad. Marcus pulled her into his lap, feeling her small body shake with sobs.
I know, baby. I know it hurts when people are cruel, but you can't fix cruelty with violence. Then how do you fix it? How do you make bullies stop? Victoria spoke for the first time, her voice gentle. You tell people who can help. You stand with your friends so they're not alone. You refuse to accept that cruelty is normal. But Emma, hitting Tyler didn't make him less mean. It just made him angrier. Now he's going to be worse to Jamie because he associates Jamie with getting hurt. Emma absorbed this, her tears slowing. So I made it worse? You stood up for your friend. That's brave. But you did it in a way that might cause more harm than help. Sometimes the brave thing isn't fighting, it's finding smarter ways to protect people. Principal Rodriguez cleared her throat. Emma will serve detention this week. I'm also requiring both families, Emma's and Tyler's, to meet with the school counselor to address the bullying. They left the school with Emma between them, her hand in Marcus's on one side and Victoria's on the other. The image struck him, this accidental family unit, held together by choice rather than blood, navigating the complicated territory of raising a child who had too much of Rebecca's fierce sense of justice. She called you family. Victoria's voice was quiet. When she explained why she defended Jamie, Marcus heard what Victoria wasn't saying, the fear underneath, the question of whether Emma really accepted her or was just being polite. Emma doesn't do polite. If she includes you in her definition of family, she means it. Even though I'm not her mother? Even though I don't know how to handle situations like this? Especially because of that. Marcus squeezed her hand. You didn't try to fix it with money or connections. You explained consequences in a way she could understand. You treated her like she was smart enough to learn from her mistake. That's what she needs. Adults who respect her intelligence while teaching her wisdom. Emma tugged on both their hands.
Can we get ice cream? Mrs. Porter says ice cream helps you think about hard things.
Victoria laughed, the sound surprised out of her. Mrs. Porter is absolutely right. Ice cream it is. They found a shop 3 blocks away, settling into a corner booth with Emma between them, chocolate ice cream already decorating her face. Marcus watched Victoria interact with his daughter, listening when Emma explained the social dynamics of 2nd grade, asking thoughtful questions, not trying too hard to be liked. His phone buzzed. A text from the prosecutor's office. Trial date set. 3 months from now. Your testimony scheduled for week 2. Prepare for media attention. Victoria saw his expression change. Derek? Trial starts in March. They want me on the stand. Emma looked up, ice cream forgotten. Are you going to tell the truth about the bad man who tried to hurt people? Marcus met his daughter's serious gaze. Yes, baby girl. Good. Mom always said the truth matters even when it's scary. She returned to her ice cream, the adult conversation apparently concluded to her satisfaction. Victoria's hand found his under the table, squeezing tight. They sat there in a Brooklyn ice cream shop, while winter light faded outside. 3 people from different worlds building something fragile and fierce. A family defined not by blood, but by the choice to show up, to be honest, to stay, even when staying was hard. Marcus Hayes had spent 3 years believing his capacity for love had died with Rebecca. Now, watching Victoria help Emma with a stubborn chocolate stain and listening to his daughter's laugh echo off tile walls, he began to believe that maybe love didn't diminish when shared. Maybe it expanded, making room for all the broken pieces to fit together into something whole. The future still terrified him. Derek's trial would bring media scrutiny. Victoria's world would always be different from his. Emma would keep growing, keep testing boundaries, keep asking hard questions he didn't know how to answer. But sitting in that booth with chocolate ice cream and fading light and 2 people who'd somehow become essential to his existence, Marcus Hayes decided that terrified was better than numb. That building something new was worth the risk of losing it. That love, messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like what he'd planned, was showing up in his life exactly when he'd stopped looking for it. The Rebecca Hayes Foundation opened 6 months after Derek Blackwood's arrest, occupying a converted warehouse in Red Hook that still smelled of fresh paint and possibility. Victoria stood at the entrance, watching Marcus install the final light fixtures, his movements efficient and practiced, transforming raw space into something functional. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, sketching the room's transformation with charcoal that smudged her fingers black. Grace Miller worked at a drafting table in the corner, designing promotional materials for the Foundation's first cohort of students, 20 single parents who'd learn plumbing, electrical work, HVAC repair over the next 6 months. Noah toddled between the adults, his 18-month-old legs unsteady but determined, clutching a toy truck that left wheel marks across the concrete floor. "Higher on the left!" Victoria called up to Marcus, who adjusted the fixture without argument, their working rhythm developed through countless hours of similar collaboration. The Foundation had consumed Victoria's life in ways the hotel empire never had. She'd sold controlling interest in Sinclair Hotels to a consortium that promised to maintain her father's legacy while freeing her from boardroom politics. The money funded this warehouse, the equipment, the instructors' salaries, the childcare facilities that would let parents learn without worrying about their kids. Derek's embezzlement trial had ended 3 weeks ago, the guilty verdicts on all counts bringing closure that felt less satisfying than Victoria had anticipated. She'd testified for 2 days, laying out the evidence with clinical precision, watching the jury's faces shift from skepticism to certainty. Derek had stared at her throughout, his expression mixing hatred with something that might have been respect for how thoroughly she'd destroyed him. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for next Monday. 15 to 20 years, the prosecutor estimated, depending on the judge's mood and Derek's cooperation with ongoing investigations into his associates. Marcus climbed down from the ladder, wiping his hands on jeans that had paint and grease in equal measure.
That's the last of them. We're operational. We're terrifying.
Victoria surveyed the space, seeing everything that could go wrong, every way she might fail the people who'd trust her with their futures. His hand found hers, fingers lacing together with the casual intimacy they'd developed over months of learning each other's rhythms. You've been saying that since we bought this building. You were terrified when we hired the instructors, terrified when the students applied, terrified when we ordered the equipment. At some point you need to accept that you're doing this, and it's real, and people believe in it. People believe in you. I'm just the checkbook. Marcus turned her to face him, his expression patient but firm. You're the woman who spent 3 months researching curriculum design because you wanted to make sure we were teaching skills that actually led to jobs. You're the person who interviewed every instructor personally because you wanted to know they cared about students, not just paychecks. You built this, Victoria. Own it. Emma looked up from her sketch. Mrs. Victoria, you're doing the thing where you make your shoulders tight and your voice gets small. That means you're scared but pretending you're not. 7 months of proximity had turned Emma into an uncomfortably accurate observer of Victoria's tells. The child had appointed herself Victoria's emotional translator, pointing out when she retreated into professional coldness or hid vulnerability behind charitable work. I'm not scared. I'm cautious. Mom used to say being cautious was just being scared with better vocabulary. Marcus's laugh rumbled through his chest. Rebecca definitely said that, usually right before she did something that terrified her. Victoria had learned to navigate conversations about Rebecca, understanding that the dead woman's presence didn't diminish her place in this makeshift family. Emma talked about her mother with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who'd processed grief as well as anyone could at 7 years old. Marcus spoke of Rebecca less often, but with a tenderness that no longer felt like betrayal when he reached for Victoria afterward. The oak tree in Marcus's backyard bore both sets of initials now, Victoria's carved below Rebecca's with Emma's help. The child had insisted on the ceremony, making Victoria promise to honor the woman who'd come before while building something new. Grace approached, Noah balanced on her hip, her expression troubled in ways that immediately set Victoria on edge. There's someone here to see you. Says her name is Patricia Morrison. She's waiting outside. The name meant nothing to Victoria, but Grace's discomfort suggested it should. Marcus's face had gone carefully blank, the expression he wore when processing information he didn't want to share. Who is she? Derek's daughter. Marcus's voice was flat. She was at the trial, sat in the back every day, took notes, didn't talk to anyone. Victoria's stomach dropped. Why would she? Only one way to find out. Patricia Morrison looked nothing like her father. Where Derek had been all sharp edges and calculated charm, his daughter radiated exhaustion and something harder to name. Mid-20s, dressed in clothes that had seen better days, carrying a messenger bag that bulged with papers. Miss Sinclair? Patricia's voice was steady, despite the tremor in her hands. I know you have no reason to talk to me. My father destroyed your company, tried to kill people, stole millions. I'm not here to defend him. Then why are you here? Patricia pulled a folder from her bag, held it out. Because he kept records. Everything he did, everyone he paid off, every corner he cut. Police seized his office computers, but he had backups. At my apartment. I didn't know they existed until after the trial. Victoria took the folder, flipped it open to find spreadsheets, emails,
contracts.
Names she recognized: city inspectors, union officials, contractors who'd worked on Sinclair properties. The scope of Derek's corruption went far beyond what had come out in trial. Why give this to me? Why not the police? Patricia's laugh was bitter. Because the police are in those files. Captains who took kickbacks, investigators who buried complaints. My father spent 20 years building a network of corrupt officials. Turning this over to law enforcement means it disappears into evidence lockers, while those same officials investigate themselves. Marcus moved to Victoria's side, reading over her shoulder, his breathing changing as he recognized names. This is half the building inspectors in Manhattan. If these bribes are real, every building Derek's company touched is suspect, every inspection potentially fraudulent, every safety certification questionable. Patricia met Victoria's eyes. You have the resources to hire independent investigators. You have the platform to make this public. I'm giving you the ammunition to burn his entire network to the ground. Why? Victoria studied the younger woman, searching for the angle, the trap Derek had surely taught his daughter to set. Because I spent my childhood watching my father lie, cheat, and destroy people who trusted him. I watched him teach those same lessons to my brother, who's now facing charges for fraud in 3 states. I watched him smile at my mother's funeral while planning which of her friends to manipulate for business advantage. Patricia's composure cracked, raw pain breaking through. He's my father, and I loved him, and I hate that I loved him. But I won't protect what he built. I won't let his corruption continue just because exposing it might hurt his legacy. The words landed with brutal honesty, the kind Victoria recognized because she'd spoken similar truths about her own parents. The difference between blood loyalty and moral clarity, between protecting family and protecting what was right. This will destroy your father completely. Not just prison, but his reputation, his legacy, everyone who ever respected him. He destroyed himself when he chose money over people. I'm just making sure everyone knows it. Patricia shouldered her bag, turned to leave, then paused. My father talked about you sometimes. After you took over Sinclair Hotels, after you started making changes, he said you were weak, that you'd inherited something you didn't deserve. But I saw you testify. I saw you dismantle his defense with facts he couldn't argue against. You're not weak, Miss Sinclair. You're what he pretended to be. Then she was gone, leaving Victoria holding evidence that would detonate through city government like a carefully placed explosive. Marcus took the folder, flipped through pages with growing horror. This is bigger than Derek. This is systemic. If we release this, people get hurt. Inspectors lose jobs. Officials face prosecution. The construction industry grinds to a halt while investigations play out. Victoria felt the weight settling onto her shoulders, responsibility she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. And if we don't release it, the corruption continues. More buildings go up with fraudulent inspections. More people trust safety certifications that aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Grace had joined them, Noah still on her hip, her expression grim. My apartment building failed inspection 6 months ago. The landlord paid someone $2,000, and suddenly we passed. I saw the cash change hands. The admission hung in the air, personal stakes making abstract corruption immediate and tangible. Emma appeared at Victoria's elbow, her sketchpad abandoned. What's wrong? Everybody looks like when the doctor told Daddy I needed surgery. Marcus knelt to his daughter's level, his hands on her shoulders. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. We found out about people doing bad things, and now we have to decide what to do about it. Tell the truth. That's what you always say. Tell the truth even when it's hard. The simplicity of childhood morality, uncomplicated by adult calculations about consequences and collateral damage. Victoria looked at this 7-year-old who'd appointed herself the Foundation's moral compass and felt something shift in her chest. You're right. We tell the truth. She pulled out her phone, dialed the number for the U.S. Attorney's Office, the federal prosecutor who'd expressed interest in Derek's case but lacked jurisdiction. That was about to change. The next 3 weeks became a controlled detonation. Federal investigators descended on the construction industry, armed with Patricia Morrison's evidence and subpoena power that couldn't be bought off. Inspectors were arrested at dawn, their homes searched, while news cameras captured footage that dominated local broadcasts. Union officials turned state's evidence, trading testimony for reduced sentences. The mayor held daily press conferences promising reform while privately scrambling to distance himself from officials he'd appointed. Victoria became the face of the scandal by virtue of being the source who'd turned over the evidence. Reporters camped outside the foundation, shouting questions about her motivations, her relationship with Derek Blackwood, why a billionaire heiress cared about construction corruption. She gave one interview to a journalist known for integrity rather than sensationalism. Derek Blackwood tried to destroy my company because I wouldn't play by his rules. He sabotaged equipment that could have killed hundreds of people. He stole millions meant for worker safety and quality materials. When his daughter gave me evidence that his corruption went deeper, I had a choice. Protect the industry that made my family's fortune, or protect the people who live in buildings that industry creates. That's not a hard choice. It's the only choice. The interview went viral, clipped and shared across social media, turning Victoria into an unlikely hero for a progressive movement demanding accountability from wealth and power. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent her entire life trying to escape her family's legacy, only to become famous for weaponizing it against corruption. Marcus watched it all from a careful distance, supporting without smothering, present without demanding attention. He kept the foundation running while Victoria fielded calls from prosecutors and testified before grand juries. He made sure Emma got to school, and Grace had help with Noah when childcare fell through. He was the kind of steady she'd never experienced, reliability without conditions. They fought for the first time on a Tuesday night, Victoria arriving at his apartment at midnight, still wired from a deposition that had lasted 9 hours. Marcus was asleep on the couch, Emma curled against him, both exhausted from a day that had started before dawn. Victoria stood in the doorway watching them, feeling the familiar ache of being outside, looking in, never quite belonging to the warmth other people generated naturally. Marcus woke to find her crying silently, tears tracking down her face without sound. He moved Emma to her bed, then pulled Victoria onto the couch, his arms around her, while she shook with the kind of crying that came from holding it together too long. "I'm so tired." The words came out broken. Tired of being strong? Tired of making decisions that hurt people even when they're right? Tired of being alone in rooms full of people who need things from me? You're not alone. I am. You have Emma, you have Mrs. Porter, you have a community that's known you your whole life. I have money and lawyers and a foundation I built to prove I'm not my father. We're playing at being together, but when this is over, when the trials end and the headlines fade, you'll remember I'm the billionaire heiress and you're the mechanic. You'll remember we don't make sense. Marcus pulled back, his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. Is that what you think? That I'm with you because of some temporary crisis? That once things calm down, I'll realize you're not worth the hassle? You should. I'm damaged, Marcus. I don't know how to love people without wondering what they want from me. I don't know how to be part of a family without feeling like an imposter. I'm so scared all the time that I'm going to wake up and you'll be gone. Or Emma will decide she doesn't like me anymore. Or this whole thing will collapse because I'm not actually capable of being who you need. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away tears that kept falling. I spent 3 years after Rebecca died, convinced I'd never feel anything for anyone again. Convinced that loving someone meant setting myself up to lose them, to feel that kind of pain again. Emma kept me functional, gave me a reason to get up every morning, but I was just going through motions. His voice roughened, emotion breaking through his usual control. Then I met you, standing in a hospital cafeteria at midnight, looking like you'd just lost a war. I watched you build a foundation from scratch because you wanted to help people, not for tax breaks or publicity. I watched you testify against corruption your father enabled because it was right, even though it cost you relationships and reputation. You're not damaged, Victoria. You're the bravest person I've ever met. I don't feel brave. I feel terrified. Brave people are always terrified. That's what makes it brave. He kissed her forehead, gentle and deliberate. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who could have coasted on her inheritance, lived a comfortable life doing nothing. Instead, you chose to burn down corruption. You chose to spend your days teaching people skills that make you irrelevant because those skills give them independence. You chose us, me and Emma and this messy, complicated life, when you could have had someone easier. Someone from your world who understood galas and board meetings. Victoria's breath hitched. I didn't choose you because you were easy. I chose you because you saw me. Not the money, not the name, not the useful connection. You saw me standing in a hospital waiting room, terrified for Emma, and you didn't try to fix it with platitudes. You just let me be scared alongside you. Then stop waiting for me to leave. Stop treating this like it'll end when you mess up badly enough. You're going to mess up, Victoria. So am I. Emma's going to get older and test boundaries and maybe resent you for not being her biological mother. Mrs. Porter's going to say something that hurts your feelings. Grace is going to need help you can't provide. That's family. It's messy and hard and nothing like the fantasy. He stood, pulling her up with him. But it's real. It's people showing up when things are difficult, not just when they're easy. It's choosing to stay even when running would be simpler. It's you and me and Emma figuring out how to be together despite all the reasons we shouldn't work. Victoria wrapped her arms around him, holding tight enough to feel his heartbeat against her chest. I don't know how to do this. I'm going to default to buying solutions instead of being present. I'm going to retreat into work when emotions get uncomfortable. I'm going to hurt Emma because I don't understand what she needs. And I'm going to shut down when I'm scared instead of talking about it. I'm going to compare you to Rebecca without meaning to. I'm going to make Emma choose between us when I should be building bridges. His arms tightened around her. We'll call each other on it. We'll be honest even when it's uncomfortable. We'll trust that what we're building can survive our damage. They stood there in his small living room, holding each other while the city noise filtered through windows that didn't quite seal, creating a moment that felt both fragile and permanent. The Foundation's first graduation happened on a Saturday in early spring, 20 students receiving certificates in trades that would change their economic trajectories. Victoria stood at the podium looking out at faces that ranged from their 20s to their 50s, single parents who'd juggled childcare and coursework, who'd shown up exhausted and determined, who'd learned skills that gave them options beyond minimum wage survival. Marcus sat in the front row, Emma on one side and Mrs. Porter on the other, his expression proud in ways that made Victoria's throat tight. Grace held Noah in the back, the toddler surprisingly still as his mother photographed the ceremony that represented her own transformation. She'd been promoted to the Foundation's creative director, her designs appearing in materials that helped other organizations replicate their model. 6 months ago, this building was empty. An idea without form, potential without direction. Victoria's voice carried across the space, amplified by microphones Marcus had installed. You transformed it into something real. You showed up before dawn for classes that started at 6. You stayed after your shifts ended at other jobs to practice installations and repairs. You trusted that learning a trade could change your life, even when the world told you that ship had sailed. She paused, gathering words that felt too large for her usual clinical precision. My father built hotels, 43 properties across 12 states, employing thousands of people, generating billions in revenue. He died convinced that was his legacy, that buildings and balance sheets defined what he'd accomplished. I stood at his funeral thinking the same thing, believing that achievement was measured in square footage and stock prices. Marcus's eyes met hers across the room, steady and certain. Then I watched a man give away his only coat in a blizzard to keep a stranger's baby warm. I watched him work 16 hours straight to fix a heating system that could have exploded, not for recognition or bonuses, but because 400 people needed to be safe. I watched him choose his daughter's welfare over his pride, accepting help he didn't want because her life mattered more than his ego. She gestured to Marcus, bringing him into the narrative. That man taught me that real wealth isn't measured in bank accounts. It's measured in the skills you master, the people you help, the character you demonstrate when no one's keeping score. He taught me that a mechanic who keeps buildings running is worth infinitely more than the executive who takes credit for stability someone else created. The students were leaning forward now, invested in a story that reflected their own struggles and choices. You came here believing you needed this foundation to succeed, but the truth is, we needed you. We needed proof that teaching practical skills to people who've been told they're too old, too poor, too damaged by circumstances creates transformation that no amount of charitable giving can match. We needed to learn that investing in people's capacity to help themselves generates returns that last generations. Victoria pulled out the first certificate, called the first name. Sarah Mitchell, single mother of 3, completed electrician certification with honors, already accepted a position with Brooklyn Electric, paying $18 an hour more than her previous job. Sarah proved that starting over at 42 isn't failure, it's courage. Sarah climbed the stage, tears streaming down her face, her hands shaking as she accepted the certificate that represented 6 months of relentless work. Victoria hugged her, feeling the woman's gratitude in the fierceness of her grip. 19 more names followed. 19 more stories of people who'd refused to accept that their circumstances defined their potential. Marcus watched each one cross the stage, his expression reflecting pride that had nothing to do with blood relation, everything to do with witnessing human transformation. The ceremony ended with Emma presenting flowers to each graduate, her 7-year-old solemnity making the gesture more touching than any adult formality. The students descended on the reception area where Mrs. Porter had orchestrated a spread that turned institutional catering into something approaching family dinner. Victoria found herself surrounded by graduates wanting to thank her, to share job offers they'd received, to introduce children who'd watched their parents transform. She accepted their gratitude with awkward grace, still learning how to receive appreciation without searching for ulterior motives. Marcus rescued her after an hour, pulling her into the relative quiet of his makeshift office. You need a break. I need to be out there. These are our students. These are people who've learned they can survive without you hovering. Let them celebrate. Victoria slumped into a chair that had seen better days, exhaustion catching up with adrenaline. Did I sound ridiculous up there? Talking about coats and blizzards like that story defines everything? You sounded honest. You told them that transformation is possible, that circumstances don't determine destiny. That's what they needed to hear. He crouched in front of her, hands on her knees. You did good, Victoria. Really good. We did good. This was your vision as much as mine. I knew what needed teaching. You made it real. There's a difference. His thumb traced circles on her kneecap, the kind of absent touch that came from comfort rather than conscious intention. Patricia Morrison was in the audience, slipped out during the reception. Victoria's stomach clenched. Derek's sentencing was scheduled for Monday, 15 years minimum based on the guilty verdicts and cooperation he'd refused to provide. Patricia had been absent from the final weeks of trial, her testimony contradicting her father's denials, helping seal his conviction. She looked proud, like watching this gave her something her father never could. The observation settled into Victoria's chest with uncomfortable weight. Patricia had destroyed her father's legacy to enable this, had chosen strangers' futures over blood loyalty, The cost of that choice would follow her the rest of her life. Monday morning arrived with rain that turned New York streets into rivers of gray. Victoria dressed in her courtroom armor, the suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, the heels that added 3 inches to her height, the makeup that transformed vulnerability into boardroom competence. Marcus wore his only suit, the one he'd bought for Rebecca's funeral and hadn't touched since, his discomfort with formality visible in how he tugged at the collar. Emma stayed with Mrs. Porter, the child's wisdom recognizing that some adult moments required absence rather than presence. She'd hugged Victoria that morning with fierce strength, whispering that her mom would be proud, that watching bad people face consequences was important, even when it felt sad. The courtroom filled with people Derek had destroyed, hotel workers he'd endangered through sabotage, contractors he'd defrauded, families whose apartments had fraudulent safety inspections. They sat in silent witness, their presence a collective weight demanding justice beyond legal technicalities. Derek Blackwood entered in prison orange, his wrists shackled, his face showing none of the charm that had carried him through decades of corruption. He looked diminished, a man who'd built power on manipulation, discovering that chains and consequences didn't negotiate. Patricia sat 3 rows behind Victoria, her expression carefully neutral, watching her father's final public appearance with the kind of attention that came from memorizing something you'd need to process later. The judge was a woman in her 60s, her reputation for harsh sentences on white-collar crime preceding her into the courtroom. She listened to the prosecutor's recommendation: 18 years, substantial fines, restitution to victims that would consume whatever assets Derek had hidden. She listened to Derek's lawyer plead for mercy based on age, health, decades of community service that the evidence had proven was public relations masking deeper corruption. Then she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of judicial authority. Mr. Blackwood, you spent 23 years building a network of corruption that endangered lives, defrauded taxpayers, and undermined public trust in institutions meant to protect citizens. You did this not from desperation or necessity, but from greed and entitlement. You believed your position, your connections, your wealth placed you above consequences. Derek's face remained impassive, but his hands clenched on the table, knuckles white with tension. The evidence presented during trial showed systematic abuse of power spanning 2 decades. You bribed inspectors, falsified safety reports, and threatened those who questioned your practices. When Ms. Sinclair inherited her father's company and began implementing ethical reforms, you attempted to destroy her through sabotage that could have resulted in mass casualties. The judge consulted her notes, the pause deliberate. Your daughter's testimony was particularly compelling. She described a childhood watching you teach that power excused morality, that success justified any means. She described the moment she realized your corruption would continue unless someone with access to evidence chose conscience over loyalty. Patricia's face crumpled at the mention, tears falling silently while her father refused to look back at her. The court sentences you to 22 years in federal prison, consecutive sentences for corruption, fraud, attempted manslaughter, and racketeering. You will pay $8.4 million in restitution to victims, forfeit all assets connected to criminal enterprises, and face supervised release for life should you survive to complete your sentence. The gavel fell, ending Derek Blackwood's freedom with judicial finality. He was led from the courtroom without looking at his daughter, without acknowledging the people he'd harmed, maintaining the arrogance that had destroyed him until the very end. Victoria found Patricia in the hallway afterward, the younger woman standing alone while reporters swarmed other witnesses. She looked devastated and relieved in equal measure, the particular grief of children who'd done the right thing at enormous personal cost. Thank you for coming. Patricia wiped her eyes, smearing mascara she hadn't bothered to waterproof. I needed to see it through. Needed to know that telling the truth mattered. It mattered. 22 years matters. 8 million in restitution matters. You saved lives by exposing him.
I destroyed my father. I sent my own parent to die in prison. That matters too. Patricia's voice broke. He called me last night. First time since the trial started.
He asked me if I was happy now, if ruining him made me feel powerful. He said I was dead to him, that I'd betrayed everything he taught me. Victoria felt rage rise, the kind that came from recognizing abuse disguised as family values. He taught you that loyalty meant complicity, that protecting him was more important than protecting the people he harmed. You rejected that teaching. You chose integrity over inheritance. That's not betrayal. That's courage. It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like I ripped my own heart out. Patricia looked at Victoria with raw pain. Does it get easier? Living with the knowledge that you destroyed someone you loved because it was necessary? The question landed with brutal accuracy, forcing Victoria to confront truths she'd avoided examining too closely. She'd destroyed her father's legacy, dismantled the empire he'd built, proven that his success was contaminated by corruption he'd enabled through willful ignorance. The man who'd raised her, who'd taught her to read balance sheets and negotiate contracts, had also taught her that profit excused ethical corners cut in its pursuit. It gets different. The sharp guilt turns into a duller ache you learn to carry. You build something new that honors what was good while refusing to perpetuate what was wrong. You accept that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from consequences they earned. Patricia nodded, the wisdom landing even as the pain remained. The foundation. That's your something new. That's choosing to be better than what I inherited. That's refusing to let my father's mistakes define what I build going forward. Victoria pulled a business card from her purse, handed it over. We're hiring. Need someone to manage partnerships with other organizations, help replicate our model in different cities. The pay is terrible compared to what you could make in corporate law, but the work matters. Patricia stared at the card like it might disappear if she blinked. You're offering me a job? After everything my father did to you? I'm offering you a chance to build something that matters. Something your father never gave you permission to want. Victoria met her eyes. You're not responsible for his choices, but you get to choose what you build from the wreckage. If you want that to be helping other people escape the traps your father set, we have work that needs doing. Patricia clutched the card, fresh tears falling. I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by showing up, by being honest when the work is hard, by refusing to replicate the patterns that destroyed your father. Victoria touched her shoulder briefly. You get to be someone different than who he raised you to be. That's the best revenge and the hardest work. But it's possible. I'm living proof. Marcus appeared at the end of the hallway, giving them space but present enough to offer support if needed. Victoria excused herself, crossing to him with relief that came from knowing he'd waited without demanding explanation. How is she? Destroyed and determined, grieving and angry. Everything you'd expect from someone who chose justice over family. Victoria leaned into him, taking comfort from his solid presence. I offered her a job. Of course you did. His arm came around her shoulders. You collect damaged people like some women collect shoes. I collect people who refuse to let damage define them. There's a difference. They left the courthouse together, emerging into rain that had softened to drizzle. The city moved around them with characteristic indifference, millions of people navigating their own struggles and victories, creating the ambient noise that made New York feel simultaneously isolating and communal. Victoria's phone buzzed with messages. Reporters requesting comment, prosecutors thanking her for testimony, the mayor's office wanting to schedule a meeting about construction reform. She silenced it all, choosing this moment with Marcus over obligations that would wait until tomorrow. Emma wants to plant a garden. His voice was casual, but Victoria recognized the significance underneath. In the backyard, she drew up plans, measured space, researched what grows well in Brooklyn. She asked if you'd help her choose seeds. The invitation was ordinary and monumental, Emma's way of weaving Victoria deeper into their family structure. The oak tree held their initials now, but the garden would be living proof of Victoria's presence, growing things that required ongoing care and attention. I don't know anything about gardens. I've killed every plant I've ever owned. Then you'll learn together. That's kind of the point. Marcus stopped walking, turning her to face him on a sidewalk crowded with people who flowed around them like water around stones. I love you, Victoria Sinclair. I love how you burn down empires when they're built on corruption. I love how you're terrified of being good enough, but show up anyway. I love that you collect damaged people and give them purpose. I love you not despite your fear, but because you choose to be brave anyway. The declaration hit her like a physical force, stealing breath and balance. They danced around the word for months, both too scared to speak it first, both waiting for certainty that never quite arrived. I love you too. I love that you see me, that you challenge me to be better, that you trust me with Emma even though I'm terrified of hurting her. I love that you fixed a heating system through the night and changed my entire understanding of what strength means. Victoria's voice shook. I love you, Marcus Hayes, and I'm so scared I'm going to mess this up. He kissed her there, on a Brooklyn sidewalk in the rain, not caring about the people rushing past or the cameras that might capture the moment. It was the kind of kiss that promised futures and acknowledged damage, that said, I see all of you and choose to stay anyway. When they broke apart, Victoria felt something shift in her chest, the constant anxiety that had accompanied her since childhood loosening just enough to let in possibility. She would mess this up. Marcus would too. Emma would test boundaries, and Grace would need help, and Patricia would struggle with the weight of her choices. The foundation would face challenges, and Derek's corruption would leave scars that took years to heal. But Victoria had spent her life measuring worth in dollars and board seats. Now she measured it in Emma's trust, Marcus's steady presence, the graduates who'd learned trades that gave them options, the corruption exposed because someone chose truth over comfort. Real wealth, she finally understood, was people showing up when it mattered. Everything else was just numbers and accounts that meant nothing without connection to give them purpose. The foundation, the family, the messy, beautiful, complicated life they were building together. This was the legacy worth leaving. Not buildings or balance sheets, but transformation and trust, and the courage to believe that broken people could build something whole if they were brave enough to try.